afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Lester Aranjado from the BSIT 2D. So today I am going to report Virtue Ethics of Aristotle. So in my topic, I have three subtopics, which is telos as ends, virtue as habit, happiness as virtue. Next is Nicomachean Ethics. Nicomachean Ethics is normally given to Aristotle's best work known on ethics, in which the work defines Aristotelian ethics. It consists of 10 books, originally separated scrolls, and is understood to be based on notes from his lectures at the Lyceum. Advances and understanding of ethics known as a virtue of ethics. One of them is Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle himself. Next is virtue ethics. A virtue ethics is a normative moral theory that emphasizes right disposition and character over right action. Questions asked by this framework are: how should I live? What sort of person should I become? And what is good life? Virtue ethics does not set up rules or principles for moral behavior. Instead, it stresses the importance of cultivating the right character, disposition, attitude, reason, and emotion, without which a moral agent can hardly do the right thing, follow moral rules, and do his moral duties. Next is the human good and the function argument. Asking what the good is for human beings is not simply because we want to have knowledge, but because we will be able to achieve our good if we develop a fuller understanding of what is to flourish, according to Aristotle. And the question is, but what is good? Aristotle's search for good is search for the highest good. It has three characteristics, which is intrinsic goods, instrumental, and both intrinsic and instrumental. The intrinsic goods, which are valued for their own sake and never for the sake of something else. For example, pleasure is the most obvious intrinsic good. Knowledge, rationality, and rational belief, beauty, aesthetic excellence, moral goodness, and self-perfection are also intrinsic goods. Next is instrumental goods. Goods which are never valued for their own sake and only for the sake of something. And instrumental values are the means by which we achieve our end goals. Example of instrumental values include being polite, obedient, and self-controlled, and some material stuff like money. Next is both intrinsic and instrumental. Goods which we valued both for their own sake and for the sake of something else, like friendship and good health. Pleasure is the most obvious intrinsic, and it is difficult to see how it can rationally be challenged. Knowledge, rationality, and rational belief, beauty, aesthetic excellence, and moral goodness and self-perfection are also intrinsic goods. According to Christine Swanton, for rules alone do not make for a good society. Not only do rules have to be made and interpreted by agents, but where there is no desire to obey them appropriately as a matter of disposition, socially necessary rules will too often be circumvented, interpreted in self-serving ways, interpreted inhumanly excessive rigidly, or interpreted loosely in ways that display weakness and cowardice. And that's my report, and the next report is my other group mates. Thank you.
Telos as ends. Telos from the Greek theos, or end, purpose, or goal. It's an end or purpose na fairly constrained sense used by philosophers such as Aristotle. It is the root of term teleology, roughly the study of purposiveness, or the study of objects with a view to their aims, purposes, or intentions. The telos of ethics, it is to achieve the highest good, which is called happiness, or it's called eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is commonly translated as happiness, flourishing, or well-being. It could also mean as good life. It must be coupled with arit, which means virtue, excellence, a character traits that human beings need in order to live in life at its best. Human beings should aim at a life in full of conformity with their rational natures, in which virtue is more important than desires and material goods. Excellence is a habit, Plato. Furthermore, the Greek term eudaimon is composed of two parts. Eu means will and daimon means divinity or spirit. He regards eudaimon as a mere substitute for eu, zen, living will. These terms play an evaluate role and are not simply descriptions of someone's state of mind. The good life is the life of virtue, and the life of virtue is the activity accordance with reason, man's highest function, Aristotle. So, goal of ethics. Aristotle believed that ethics is a practical ethics. We are not studying in order to know what virtue is, but to become good, for otherwise there would be not profit in it. For us, the practice of virtue, acts or good acts, it needs to be done repeatedly, sort of like the concept of learning by doing, and the concept of repetition is a matter of learning. The nature of virtue of ethics. The virtue of ethics claims that it's important to not only do the right thing but also have the correct disposition, motivation, and emotion in being good and doing right. So, virtues of character are dispositions to act in certain ways in response to similar situations. Each of the virtues is a state of being that natural seeks in its main. So, virtue of habit of action is always in an intermediate state between the opposed vices or exists the deficiency. So, that's all.
So, for the continuation of our report, Aristotle on virtue and the good life. The good life is fulfilling on purpose and or telos. But what is our purpose as a human being? The good is the aim of every human endeavor. So, virtues. There are four types of cardinal virtues, which is the prudence, also known as practical wisdom. This is the most important virtue for Aristotle. Another is the temperance, or self-control, simply means moderation. Another is the courage. Courage is the observance of the mean with regard to things that excite confidence or fear. Justice is the means in giving the enemy that is due to them in a proper manner. So prudence is the ability to govern and discipline oneself by the use of reason. So there Aristotle's have a concept of the golden mean, which is the deficiency, balance, and excess. For example, cowardice. The balance of cowardice is the courage, while the excess of cowardice is the rashness. Another example is humility. The balance of humility is the modesty, and the excess of humility is the pride. So, to achieve a good life, one must act in moderation, cultivating his or her virtuous habit that lies in the mean and contemplation. So, the earliest representation of this idea in culture is probably in the mythological Cretan tale of Daedalus and Icarus. So Daedalus, a famous artist of his time, built feathered wings for himself and his son so that they might escape the clutches King Minos. Daedalus warns his beloved son, whom he loved so much, to fly the middle course between the sea spray and the sun's heat. Icarus did not heed his father. He flew up and up until the sun melted the wax off his wings. For not heeding the middle course, he fell into the sea and drowned. So some Eastern philosophers, which is Gautama Buddha, thought of the middle way, a path between the extremes of religious asceticism and worldly self-indulgence. So another is Confucius in the Analects, written through the Warring States period of ancient China. Thought exists is similar to deficiency, a way of living. In the mean is the way of Zongyong. So what makes us really happy? True happiness is a result of good conduct, which arises from habits that are acquired by repeated action and correction of those habits. Ethics becomes habituated in an everyday discipline. According to Aristotle, the virtuous habit of action is always an intermediate state between the opposed vices of excess and deficiency. Too much and too little are always wrong. The right kind of action always lies in the mean, and the courageous person has the balance.